Hey friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tenacious V's podcast. Every couple of weeks, I sit down with a few friends and a few drinks, and we discuss an incredible historical woman. I do a bunch of research and learn as much as I can, while my friends come in absolutely blind. They just don't even know who we're discussing. So we cover fact, fiction, myth, and legend, and we're all about telling the truth and just getting these lesser known stories out there, because the untold side of history is just as interesting as the told side of history. So this week we're discussing Josephine Baker. She was an American-born woman, but she lived as a French citizen, and she was a massive proponent for American civil rights. This woman was just seriously amazing, insanely awesome, just start to finish. There's a little iffiness at the end, but I mean, who doesn't have one or two black marks on their record? I just couldn't get enough of her. She needs to be a movie really badly. Her life was just so full of amazing feats that it's hard to summarize. But from her activism to her groundbreaking entertainment career to being a spy, there's never a dull moment with Josephine Baker. So we hope you enjoy this episode. Bonjour, les amis! Welcome back to another episode of Tenacious V's podcast. Today I will be joined by my friends Sam and Will, and today we're going to be discussing Josephine Baker. Do you guys know her?
I do not.
No?
I'd be a smartass, but I'm gonna say it. Was she a baker?
No, she wasn't.
Who was Josephine?
So she was an American-born French entertainer, resistance agent, and civil rights activist.
Resistance agent. Did she work for military or like the
Yeah,
government?
yeah,
Is she a fucking spy?
yeah.
That's cool. Okay.
Fuck yeah.
Cool.
So, did she work for like the U.S. government or?
Not the U.S. government, the French government.
French government.
So
Oh, okay.
she is American-born, but she renounced her American citizenship, which we'll get into a little bit later, and became French, and she preferred that, and she kind of hated America for very good reason. So I chose to say hello in French, which is like her chosen language.
Okay.
I see.
Was this like pre or post French Revolutionary War?
Post. So she was
Okay.
born in 1906, June 3rd, 1906, in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she was during the First World War.
Second.
Second.
Yeah.
So
Was
she must have been
born-
in like her 40s when she was. Maybe.
30s and 40s, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, like 30s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Earlier than that. It was 1907 when she was born.
1906, and then the war broke out in 36 in France, I believe. I have
And
it.
she was American born in France. Wow, and a
Mhm.
French citizen.
Dude,
Interesting. Okay.
she's so awesome.
Wow.
Cool. Sorry. Okay.
No, you're good.
Go ahead, yeah.
So, from her entertainment career, she had 3 nicknames, which were Black Venus, Bronze Venus, and the Black Pearl, which, if anyone listened to the Wilma Rudolph episode, her nickname was also the Black Pearl. So that's kind of interesting. And
Is she a fucking assassin?
No.
Okay.
No.
Sorry.
I'm gonna go through some like kind of mundane childhood stuff first,
It's a
but
very assassin name though. I get where you come from.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, cool.
So her born name was Frida Josephine McDonald, and her mother was Carrie McDonald. So her mother, Carrie, was adopted in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1886 by Richard and Elvira McDonald, who were farmers and former slaves of African and Native American descent, respectively. So she was a colored woman. Like her mother was like purely not white. And so Josephine's estate names vaudeville drummer Eddie Carson as her like father, but like all evidence points to that not being the case because he was also a black man, and her entire family, like including herself and her parents, felt that she was mixed with white
you know? And so she had a foster son, Jean-Claude Baker, who wrote a biography in 1993 called Josephine the Hungry Heart. And in this, he did like a shit ton of research into her background, and like he really wanted to find out who her real father was. So he like dug through hospital records and everything. Her father on her birth certificate is just listed as EDW. So like he never actually found out who it was, but her mother at the time was working for a wealthy German family as like a live-in kind of like maid. And so mixed with white, German family with a maid.
Right.
Also, she was born 6 weeks early, and her mom actually ended up spending 6 weeks in the hospital, which is unheard of for African American people at that time. Like, they did not get that kind of medical care. And her birth was signed by the chief of medicine.
Oh, wow.
So, like, there was money involved in her birth, is what I'm saying. Like,
Okay.
somebody funded that because her mom did not have the means to do that. So.
Okay, so the father was probably some legitimate wealthy individual.
Yeah, it's probably the German guy that her
Yeah,
mom was working
allegedly.
for, allegedly. Yeah. But we actually no one knows to this day, and she never spoke about it until her death, and she always just said it was Eddie Carson, and he just played along, like he always just was like, "Yep, that's my daughter." So.
Do you know if they had like a relationship like that? Like if they were very close? Like
They never like lived together as far as I'm aware, but I think they like hung out and kind of like he might have taken her to performances and like him and her mom were very close and like they had a song dance act that played like pretty much wherever they could that would pay them, and they started bringing Josephine on stage for the finale like when she was about 1. So that's how she got introduced to like showbiz. And
at the age of
then
1, okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Because her mom was also an entertainer. And so like other early exposure was like her neighborhood, which was a vaudeville theater neighborhood. So they also had like movie houses, and they had the Jazzland, Booker T. Washington, and the Comet were like right down the street from her, which are all like really famous vaudeville or jazz like clubs from that time.
Because this was like
This is like 19 teens.
getting close to the roaring 20s then.
Yeah, getting into the 20s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, or no, I guess this would have been like like 1911 to like 1920, probably around that time.
So it's kind of like around the time of like when jazz was kind of seen as a almost an illegal activity, associated with prohibition and stuff like that. Right?
Yeah, it was like more underground and like definitely a more colored scene. Like it wasn't like a white people thing yet, so it wasn't mainstream because that was so taboo at the time.
It's like the punk rock early 1900s.
Exactly. So as a kid, she spent her childhood just in the Mill Creek Valley neighborhood of St. Louis, which was a very racially diverse, low-income area near Union Station, and it was just like full of rooming houses, brothels, and apartments that had no plumbing. And so she was pretty much always hungry and just poorly dressed, and she got all her street smarts like playing in the rail yards and hanging out with old jazz musicians and stuff. So, pretty cool. She attended Lincoln Elementary School through grade 5, and then her mother married like a really nice guy, but he never had a job. Like he couldn't hold one down for more than a couple days to save his life or their lives. And his name was Arthur Martin, and they had a son, Arthur, and 2 daughters, Marguerite and Willie, which is like a weird name for a little girl. But Carrie, her mom, was doing people's laundry just to make ends meet, just like bringing in wash and doing that for everyone. And she began working at 8 years old as a live-in domestic for white families. And one woman, when she used too much soap in the laundry, burned her hands. So, just like fucking terrible.
So there's a lot of like unchecked chemicals and everything, and like a domestic job like that was actually hazardous to human health because of the lack of checks and balances.
Well, and I think they used like pretty harsh lye soap for laundry back then, so yeah. So then she ended up dropping out of school by the age of 12. It didn't give me an like she dropped out of this grade or anything like that. So it was just by the age of 12. And then at 13, she was living on the streets, sleeping in cardboard boxes and scavenging food. And she was working as a waitress where she met her first husband, Willie Wells. It was at the Old Chauffeurs Club.
It's a good name.
Yeah, Willie Wells. There's so many Willies in this story. It's ridiculous. Her little sister's Willie. Her first husband is, so they get married when she's 13, and then they divorce a year later.
But was that normal at the time? Like, 'cause that's even young for that time. I know people.
I don't know. I'm not super up on early 1900s American wedding culture, so
Yeah, you know what? Me neither.
it doesn't sound too far-fetched to me, though, especially if she was, like, willing and, like, she's already living on the streets working by herself. Why would she not get married and, like, make a more stable life, you know?
That's a fair argument. Okay, yeah, totally. Okay.
But yeah, so they divorced when she was 14. And then she found work with the Jones Family Band, which is like a street performance group, so kind of like busking.
Right.
But they like sometimes would set up little, like in the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, the one with the performing acts,
Sure.
like kind of like that, but
Okay.
you know.
Yeah, like little performances.
Yeah, a little like stage thing. Yeah.
Totally.
So then in 1921, at 15, she got married a second time to another man named Willie. And this guy's name was Willie Baker. And though they divorced in 1925 when her vaudeville troupe was booked in New York City, like it sounds like it was kind of like he didn't want her to go to New York, and she's like, no, this is my big break. I'm fucking going to New York. And so they divorced. And but she kept the name Baker for the rest of her life. Like,
sorry, and she did end up going to New York.
Mm-hmm.
Don't remember, where was she at the time before she got
St. Louis.
St. Louis, Missouri. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, so she went to New York, and like that's when she started to be successful. So she still had the last name Baker, and she's like, well, I've got success with this last name, I'm keeping it. And she became Josephine Baker. So like through all this time, her and her mom were really like on super rocky terms, and because her mom like really did not want to be a performer, and she said she should have like taken better care of Willie Baker and stayed with him and all these things. You know, her mom was just like worried really. But every time she would travel and go out with her troupe, she would bring back money and gifts for her mom and her sisters, and she was like really good to them, but her mom just like was not about it.
Independent, self-made woman.
Yeah. But so like the fighting with her mom is actually what led her to go to France for the first time. And
oh shit. So, okay, I'm just gonna say this. From the beginning, when I was hearing how the story was going, I totally thought that because this was in America, because of the time, that it would have been like a racial thing, like because of like that would send her overseas to somewhere like France, where I think that
they're very racially accepting.
Exactly.
But, yeah.
So like hearing that it was like trouble with a parent, that's kind of threw me for a loop. I'm not gonna lie. Like I totally automatically assumed that it was like a racial thing at the
But I
time.
mean, you could also see that as like a societal thing and like a larger aspect of it, in which her mom expected her to find a husband to marry that would carry her through it, and she wasn't about that societal expectation of her to, you know,
Totally.
you know, adhere to getting a husband and, you know, rely on that husband to treat her the way that she needed, quote unquote, to be treated, and, you know, wanted to be independent. And,
She's
you
an
know,
independent black woman, don't need no man.
She doesn't do man.
So like just prior to going to France, she like badgered a show manager like relentlessly until he got her a spot in the St. Louis Vaudeville Choir chorus show. I apologize.
Does that still work? Sorry, just kidding. Go ahead.
So she was cast as the last dancer on the end of the row. So like a chorus line, for anyone that doesn't know, is like a line of dancers, and they like do kind of similar things, or there will be like one or two that come forward and do like a solo kind of thing, but it's just basically like a line of dancers that like perform together.
Synchronized kind of thing.
But her whole thing, she was called the pony. And so her whole thing was that she was supposed to act just really ridiculous and like she couldn't grasp the dance and like be like comedic about it. And then at the end of the show, she would just like bust out with the like final act and just like not only do it perfectly but add more intricate steps to it than there were originally. So she would just like blow people's minds at the end of the show.
Kind of like, is overperform the wrong word? Because like, kind of just like, kind of go out there and like, she fucking was expected to do one thing. And
I feel like the Trojan horse of talent would be
that is
like
awesome.
a
Is
good
that what it is?
explanation.
That's pretty
for it.
cool.
Well,
Do
yeah.
that.
So like
Is that
for the
what it
whole
is?
show,
That's
it was
pretty
like
cool.
everyone's like, "Oh, haha, this girl's terrible. Why would they hire her? She can't dance at all." And then at the end, she just like bust out, and they'd be like,
Blow their fucking
"Holy
minds.
shit!"
Okay.
You know.
Yeah,
So like
like-
that was her thing in that troupe,
Nice.
which I think is super cool.
And just for reference, like around how old do we think she was at this time? Like in her 20s, 30s, or
Oh no.
No.
So
much
she
younger?
sails
Late
to
teens.
Paris in 1925 at age 19, so like 17, 18.
Okay. All right. Cool.
So on October 2nd, 1925, so this is like right after getting to Paris, she opened in, okay, my French is terrible, so I apologize. La Revue Negre at the Theatre des Champs, I have no idea, it's the river that goes through France. Champs-Élysées, that's my best guess. And she called that her big break. She said that on Broadway, she was just part of a chorus show and had no real part of her own, even though she was kind of like the outstanding star of it. Like, she said that was not her big break, and she didn't really care about that. So yeah, she was really excited to be in Paris, and she said that she hated America, she couldn't stand it, and she actually became one of the first colored Americans to move to Paris, along with Ada Bricktop Smith, who she called Bricky.
Who was Bricky? Like that name.
She was another entertainer, and then she was a self-proclaimed saloon owner.
Dope.
Right? Yeah, this lady seems
I want
cool.
to do that.
But it was like-
Let's talk about Bricky later.
Yeah.
What about Bricky?
But there was, everyone said that everyone knows Bricky, and then through that, everyone came to know Josephine Baker, and they loved her. But the two of them had a marvelous time together. So, like, once she got to Paris, she became pretty much instantly famous for her erotic dancing and appearing, like, practically naked on stage. So everyone was, like, all about it, but it wasn't, like, an artful way. It wasn't, like, a weird, creepy strip club. So she ended up doing a really successful tour through Europe, but then she broke her contract and returned to France to be a star at Folies Bergère, which set the standard for her future performances, like being on stage by herself and having the crowds that she did and everything. Like, she kind of like came into herself at that point. And then she performed the Danse Sauvage wearing a skirt of artificial bananas, and people fucking loved it. Like, all about it. So this coincided with the Exposition des Arts Décoratifs, which led to Art Deco, and the reemergence of non-Western art forms, such as like African and Asian art forms.
Her fucking performance
Mhm.
led to the resurgence of these art style.
It led to the formation of Art Deco.
God damn.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she kind of opened up the gates to basically allow the tolerance to kind of sway in the way of, you know, minority art once again.
Yeah, well, and more so, she just kind of like opened people's eyes to the fact that not all art and entertainment has to be Western. Like, it doesn't have to be that French, like, sensual shit. Like, she did,
Structured, like,
yeah. So
okay.
it was more like an African-based like thing, or like she would like pull from different influences, and so people were kind of like, oh wow, like we can look at the rest of the world for inspiration, you know?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So like in later shows in Paris, this is my absolute favorite part. Her pet cheetah named Chiquita, who wore a diamond collar, would like go on stage with her. She'd
Fucking
bring her
winning.
up
Wow.
on stage,
Get
and
it,
then the cheetah would like jump off stage into the orchestra and just terrorize the orchestra, which everyone said just added more excitement to the show. Like, no one was like, oh, let's get this fucking wild animal out of here. They're like, wow, this is thrilling.
Do we have any word on what the orchestra had to say about it? Because I'm sure the orchestra.
Dude, I bet she fucked up a few string instruments.
No, the whole fucking cheetah on stage wearing diamonds and all that jazz. I'd be down to see that today. Fucking
Hell
a show like that.
yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, fuck yeah. That sounds pretty dope. Like something out of a Batman comic. But,
Dude, I just think
yeah,
that's
but-
who has a pet cheetah?
That's what I'm saying. It sounds like something out of a Batman comic.
That's so fucking
Sometimes
cool.
you gotta go to lengths to start a pit.
Yeah. Throw the cheetah out. Open this pit up.
Let's open this bit up. Where's our cheetah?
Where's Chiquita?
Chiquita. That's
Isn't
a great
that a
name
great-
for it. That's
yeah.
just about to
I
say,
love it.
totally.
And she does the banana thing. Like, she's really, really, really well known for wearing bananas. So you can actually, YouTube has all sorts of videos of her. So you can actually go online and find videos of this woman dancing and entertaining.
Oh.
And there's a few like documentaries and things like that as well. So yeah, if you want to like actually see her dance, you can. So Ernest Hemingway actually called her the most sensational woman anyone ever saw.
That abusive drunk?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
And then Picasso did paintings of her, and then she ended up being the most successful American entertainer in all of France. Pretty
Wow.
dope.
Pretty successful.
Yeah.
And she was probably, what, in her early 20s?
Early
Early 20s, yeah. So then she ended up starring in 3 films, famous only in Europe, but not only in France, like all throughout Europe. And so they were called Siren of the Tropics, which was a silent film in 1927. And then I think it's Zuzu, it's Zouzou, and that was in 1934. But this was, she was a starring role in this movie, and she was the first African American female to star in a major motion picture, which was that movie, Zuzu, Zao Zao.
Holy shit.
And that's pretty impressive because
Fucking
at that time wasn't World War I heavily underway?
Ending?
No,
Or-
World War
World War
One
I
was
supposed
like
to end, wasn't it?
about
1916,
over, and World War Two was like about to break out. So it's kind of like the calm between the storms
But the
at this
fact that she
point.
was in France doing this in the aftermath of World War One, which basically almost
Destroyed it.
completely dismantled that country,
Yeah.
and still making a effective career out of entertainment in
Right.
that country is extremely impressive.
Maybe
yeah.
it's that's exactly what the fucking people needed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what the French people needed. They needed some
Yeah,
fucking
exactly.
morale. And
Something
just wanted
to get their
it.
mind off of the horrors of trench warfare. once
Exactly.
Well, it's
Yeah,
actually-
seriously.
It's actually been proven through studies that during times of depressions and things like economic depressions, and after war times, like movie theater viewings and like concerts and stuff like that, like the attendance doesn't drop as much as you'd think it would. Like it only drops a couple percent because people will scrimp and save to get that break from reality. Like that's such an important thing for humans to have in harsh times, especially that like entertainment is always an industry. It doesn't matter what your economy looks like. There's always going to be entertainment.
What was it? Bread and circus, or whatever the Romans called it, when they would do basically gladiator fights. They would give out free food and free
Mhm.
fights. Yeah, so that's like keeping a happy public, I guess.
Yeah,
Okay.
you want your people as happy as possible, I would think.
Unless you want to be a tyrant.
Yeah. So and then the third one was called Princess Tam Tam, and that was in 1935. So she was fucking busy. She did 2 movies in 2 years, which is like a lot, I think. And so then in 1934, she also had a leading role in Jacques Offenbach's opera Les Créoles.
So she was
La
a singer
Feo.
too.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, she
Wow.
was a singer, a dancer, an actress. Like she did it all.
threat.
Yeah. And all that jazz. So she went through extensive voice training for the role in the opera, and Shirley Bassey, who's a Welsh Singer, said she went from a petite danseuse sauvage with a decent voice to la grande diva magnifique, which is the grand diva magnificent, if you don't speak French.
So,
I'm interested in hearing.
so
little
basically,
bit more.
the head act.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and she was saying that she went from like, kind of like a more timid, kind of like quieter, not amazing voice, like a good voice, but not like incredible, to just like,
bold.
fuck, this woman's amazing. You know, like she changed her whole voice around, which was pretty awesome. So then after that, she did a Broadway stint in America, and it just went fucking terribly. They called her a Negro wench, and she returned to Paris and renounced her U.S. citizenship to become French, like then and there.
Shit, me
Well,
too.
yeah, I mean, that's pretty much par for the course for American,
Yeah.
society.
Well, good
Well,
on her.
and they also
unfortunately.
said that her voice was too thin and wafty, or thin and dwarf-like, to fill a theater and all these
They're
things.
fucking
Whereas, like,
grasping. It's fucking racism.
yeah, they were like, no one outside of France would ever find her talented, and all these just terrible things about an amazingly talented woman. Okay, so then, September of 1939, France declared war on Germany for invading Poland, and Josephine was recruited by the French military intelligence as an honorable correspondent.
Oh, wow.
She was multilingual. She was talented. She
was
was
famous, she was popular,
Makes
everyone
sense,
loved
yeah.
her.
The
She
perfect
already had
spy.
contacts in other countries,
Hi-
like she'd already done a tour throughout Europe, so
Hide your best asset in plain sight. Kind of
Mhm.
thing. Yeah.
Totally.
absolutely.
Makes sense.
Hangs out with the higher echelon of like social class.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Yeah.
oh shit.
Wow.
So she would go
Pretty
around
impressive.
and
Hell
collect.
yeah.
Yeah, dude, she was fucking awesome. And she'd go to like parties, as much information as she could about German troop locations from like officials that she would meet. And she specialized in gathering.
Hanging out with officers and getting
Mhm.
like intelligence, basically intelligence gathering.
Yeah.
Like, oh fuck.
But
So that's super like that's like dangerous, like penalty of death.
oh, absolutely.
Like
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, she was risking it all. But so her specialty was charming people at embassies and ministries and gathering information from them. And she even went to the Italian embassy, and she drew no suspicion at all. Like, no one was even like, maybe we should keep an eye on her.
So this woman just showed up at the Italian embassy and gathered
I think
information.
no.
like
I think
this-
there was like a party or like some sort of like ambassador meeting, or like it didn't tell me like this is the event that she
Sure.
went to, but like
she like smoothed her way.
Mhm.
At the same time, like you see a person like that at like a higher up party, you don't suspect them because they're like, oh, that's the celebrity appearance
Mhm.
at said party. You don't suspect
She's
them
the
of
most famous
being
American
there
in
to
France.
collect intelligence. You just see them as there to be the
This is a
pretty face to add to the
Exactly.
bling bling of the party.
This is a little off topic, but recently, I think it was during the Obama administration, there was a big dining or something at the White House,
Mhm.
which had like 4 points of security from the front gate to like getting actually up to the lawn, and there was just the civilian couple that were able to, because the way they dressed, because the way they acted, they were able to make their way and like get photographs and shake hands
Oh,
with
wow.
the president and everything, or maybe vice president. I don't know,
But yeah.
that type of thing. Because
Appearances are everything when it comes to, especially when it comes to that high class of people. If
Oh,
you
yeah.
know what you're wearing, if you know that what you're wearing costs over $5,000, then you can pretty much get in a higher echelon.
Well,
Yeah.
and then you also have to think like she's a gorgeous woman from America who's only educated until she was 12. So you can't look at this
Crazy.
woman and be like, oh, she's an intelligent person. You know what I mean? Like, especially at that time, and like this is all awful to think about nowadays, you know, but like, and from my perspective, it's terrible, but like, she was, like Sam said, just a pretty face to add to the crowd. Like, she wasn't there to, from their perspectives, she wasn't gonna be intelligent enough to do anything or help along anything, you know?
On that same note, though, like you had American society at that point thinking that, women were, less than men, and that women, didn't have the intelligence to pull something off like that, which was their own
Well,
downfall.
and not
in
even
this,
just women, black people too,
yeah,
and
yeah,
she's
yeah,
both.
yeah, as well. And in this, especially in this instance, they shot themselves in the foot with their own ignorance.
Well, she
With
was
that shit,
so
yeah.
she was
Yeah,
working with the
totally.
Allied forces, so she was working with America, not against them. So like, but yes, America would have been fucked if she had been
Oh,
working against them.
sorry.
For sure.
but she should have worked against America because she would have done great.
Oh yeah. But yeah, her like you all said, her fame allowed her to get in the know with people, including high-ranking Japanese and Italian bureaucrats and
Yeah.
officials. So like she had global contacts with high up people in militaries from all of the Axis countries, basically.
Yeah.
Like I think except Germany.
Well, I mean, if you know anything about Italian society, Italian politics, like Italians were, I mean, especially during that time under Mussolini and shit,
Right.
like, during the fascist rule of Mussolini, like, it was much the same way that, like, America treats their women and shit, like, I
Mhm.
mean, it was very sexist, very,
Yeah.
very, very racist, that whole bit,
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, this is right around the time where Rita Levi Montalcini was getting kicked out of her position at the college, so that was a couple episodes ago.
Scientist, but anyways.
Yeah. So when Germany did invade France, Josephine left Paris and she had a couple homes throughout the country, and she went to another one of her homes, and she ended up housing people who were helping the Free French effort, which was led by Charles de Gaulle, and supplying them with visas, like work visas and just anything to get them safe. So
Totally.
seriously, this woman's just breaking the law in the best way possible at every turn.
Nice.
So as an entertainer, she had an excuse to travel Europe, visiting neutral countries, and even going to South America. And she would carry information and transmit it to England about like airfield harbors, German troop concentrations, like everything. And the notes were written on her sheet music in invisible ink.
Fucking A. That is fucking spy shit. Holy shit.
invisible.
I love that.
I
Hell
mean,
yeah.
when you were a kid and you were thinking about like what is some spy shit,
Invisible
ink was like in the top five by any means.
Everyone's top 5 list, invisible ink.
Of course, yeah.
I'm just an entertainer.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So what did she
damn,
do?
that's
Like
good.
did she do like things like USO shows for like German troops or anything?
No,
like
not
that?
German. She
Oh,
didn't
okay.
work with Germany. She
Oh,
was
okay.
against Germany.
Well,
But,
no, I don't mean like working with them, but to gain intelligence. Did she
No,
do any performances in Nazi territory?
So
is what I
she
mean.
was mostly getting all of her information from Italian and Japanese sources.
Okay.
I don't, as far as I know, she didn't have German contacts.
Oh,
She
okay.
might have run into some officers and kind of sweet talked them into some information, like, "Hey, where are you staying at?"
I mean-
and stuff like that, But
I mean,
like,
also knowing about Nazi Germany and shit, they probably
Fucking
wouldn't
sick.
take it too kindly to her in the first place.
she's
It's like-
a black woman. There's no way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In
Yeah.
Germany at the time? I don't
yeah,
think so.
Yeah. Probably not.
But then again, and like Nona had said earlier, in fucking France, I feel like that it was way more
Yeah.
accepted, and
Yeah.
Yeah, France was really cool with her and Miss Bricky.
We need to talk about Bricky later.
I'm
I
all
wanna
about-
hear
I
more.
love
I'd
that
like to learn
name.
More about Brady.
So in 1941, her and her entourage went to the French colonies in North Africa, and they said it was due to her health, so she could go down and get some rest and kind of get away from everything. But they really went to continue the resistance from a Moroccan base, and she would pin notes inside her underwear, counting on her fame to keep her safe from the strip searches.
Wow, that is fucking bold.
Risky as fuck.
Crazy.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Wow. Damn.
And I hate to get to that point, but she wasn't found out in that situation, was she?
No.
Like, excellent.
Yeah,
Cool.
That's
it
great.
worked. They didn't search her.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie. Every time that I've been here that we've discussed these, I'm always super concerned that I'm like, Is that
Do
when
they
it
get caught?
Is that when it went
Is this
bad?
it?
Is that when it went bad?
Does it go wrong here?
No, our last.
So while she was in Morocco, she met the Pasha of Marrakesh, which is a really high-ranking Ottoman official, like a general or a director or something like that. And she actually helped her through the last of many of miscarriages.
I'm interrupting you again.
Go
Sorry,
for it.
but was that in
Morocco.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But so she was an Ottoman official, the Pasha of Marrakesh. I didn't get her name, but she's an amazing woman as well. And so they were in French territories in Morocco at this point.
Okay.
And she was having a miscarriage, so she did have some health issues at this time, but she was still also fighting for the resistance. And the Marrakesh lady was like really supportive, and like they became very close friends through this whole ordeal. And from the miscarriage, she developed like a really severe infection, which led to her getting a hysterectomy, which led to her getting sepsis, and it was pretty bad. But she recovered.
Oh,
And
that's good. It's getting kind of
I like to keep you on your toes.
but you just.
But yeah, so after she recovered, her and her troop started touring North Africa to entertain all the Allied forces. So like Sam said, she was doing the USO shows, but not like as an infiltrator. They had no entertainment, and they were just kind of like alone in North Africa, like just like hanging out. So she started doing like entertainment shows, and she allowed no civilians, and she did not charge the soldiers. Yeah. So she's
Another morale boost.
Yeah, she was pretty awesome.
Fortunately, there's no civilians allowed though.
Well,
those people are fighting in their land. They should at least get some kind of.
well, she did shows and stuff. You know what I mean? Like they could
Yeah.
go see her. She was just doing free shows to help out the soldiers.
So there were specific shows set aside,
Mhm.
but while there, I think what Nota's saying is that she actually would perform other.
Yeah.
Oh,
She
okay.
would do-
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so she
Sorry.
would do like shows for civilians. They just had to pay, but she would do free shows for the soldiers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay.
So then after the war ended, she got the Croix de Guerre, which is the Cross of War, which is a military war medal in France. And she also got the Legion of Honor, and they were both given to her by General Charles de Gaulle, the guy she was helping from the French freedom. Yeah. So then at this point, she was married to Joe Bouillon.
This is her fourth husband.
There's one that we never mentioned, but this is her fourth husband, and so he's actually the one before him is the one she married to get her French citizenship. Like they were also had a relationship.
Yeah,
it
I was
wasn't
about
just
to say.
for that.
I wonder if this guy was like, yes, let's get married, because this is something to help,
I think
have
it was.
you leave America.
Yeah,
kind of, and
I
get
think
your
it was kind of
citizenship
like
here.
they had a relationship, but it wouldn't have gone that far if she didn't need the citizenship. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Kind of situation is what it seemed like. But Joe Bouillon was her longest husband, and they were married for 14 years. And he was a French composer and conductor. Their marriage ended when she adopted her 11th child.
11th child.
11th.
Wow. Yeah, there's
This all
been
happened
no
between-
mention of children.
Yeah,
yet,
well, I mean,
Yeah.
there has been miscarriage, but
Wow.
had this all happened between, because you had mentioned the miscarriage, so
Yeah.
did this happen,
Between her first miscarriage, which was supposed to be her first child, then she adopted.
So she
9
started
children?
adopting children. She adopted 12 total, and she started in the 1950s in America, and we'll get to that in just a moment.
Sorry,
No, go for it.
any biological children?
No, she had
Wow.
several miscarriages.
These were foster and adopted children. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, so
That's the
she
way
had.
to do it.
Yeah.
Well, and
Hell yeah.
earlier I said foster child Jean-Claude, but I'm pretty sure she fully adopted all of her children. And if she was fostering them, I think it was more in a sense of like being a safe house, not like legally fostering. You know what I mean? Like just kind of like, hey, you and your mom are fighting. I'll take you off the street for a couple months till everything can cool down, and then you can go home. Because she basically had an estate in France at this point, which included like a hotel, a swimming pool, like a couple of houses. Like she had enough means for all the children. Yeah.
Yeah, if anybody's thinking about having children, adoption might be fostering. It's
Yeah.
totally adoption.
Unfortunately, that chateau, which is like a compound kind of thing, was foreclosed when her and Joe divorced, and she actually had to be forcibly removed from the property. She would not leave.
Oh wow.
She was standing her ground, so they had to okay. Did she go to jail? Did she
No, they
it
just
was
were like, get the fuck out
I
of
got
here,
you.
and just kind of like literally like carried her off the property, and like we're like, okay, this is ours now.
Thanks.
Yeah. So 1949, Josephine had like kind of totally reimagined herself with a lot more seriousness behind her, like due to her war medals and all that stuff.
Sure.
Like she was like considered a war hero.
I wonder if the war itself impacted that, because you're saying that she went for a more serious tone. Maybe the war itself, being around shit like that, I'm sure.
Definitely.
But I mean, obviously she earned the medals for her intelligence work.
But then so a lot of the seriousness in her mind came from people's opinions of her as a war hero rather than like, because it was more like, oh, now I have the backing to actually do serious entertainment work rather than just singing like banana skirt songs. Not that that's not awesome too, but
Sure.
But she can actually get like seriously political with her work.
Well, yeah, and she would sing like a lot more serious songs and perform like more serious pieces and do like pieces with some weight to them, like it's like an expose on the society and things like that. So then in 1951, she was invited to play a nightclub in Miami, and they offered her $10,000 to play, which is fucking huge in 1951. And she said, absolutely not, unless you will agree to be non-segregated.
Hell yeah.
So they did.
No way.
Yep.
Holy shit. Okay, was this just one-time performance, or was this like a...
It like led to more and more non-segregation in entertainment, but like I think for that particular club it was kind of just like for her performance, and then like later they became non-segregated entirely.
Wow.
Get
it, girl.
Yeah.
So then,
yeah, fucking A, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, 1950s, so yeah.
Not just 1950s, 1951. Yeah, it's fucking crazy. But then, so like, it was such a successful show that she ended up doing a full U.S. tour, and she was greeted in New York with a parade of 100,000 people celebrating her being the NAACP's Woman of the Year.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
This was probably in her mid-40s?
So she'd be 45.
Okay.
Yeah. So she ended up, there was a club called the Stork Club, and she...
Sorry, was this in New York? Because we just left off in New York. That was the last time.
I don't know.
So we left off.
It might be in New York, yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna say yes, but I might be wrong.
This was during a trip?
Or
did she end up moving back?
She didn't move back. She did. So she ended up staying longer than she was going to and doing a full tour of like the United States.
Cool.
And then, so her tour ended here though, because so she criticized the Stork Club because they were discouraging Black patrons. And then she got really pissed at her friend and columnist Walter Winchell because he didn't support her, like he didn't jump to her aid, And so she was like, fuck you, dude. Like, you don't care about Black people. Like, you're a dick. And so he started putting out columns about how she's a communist sympathizer and just slandering her. Yeah.
And during the 50s with communism.
Extremely, like,
shit starting to become
the
a concern.
Scare,
That's right.
Fucking shit.
So that
Yeah,
actually,
that lots of people's career during that time. If you wanted to
Like the
destroy someone's,
Rosenbergs and shit.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, like whether it's true or not, if you
Sure.
were seen as a communist sympathizer in those times, yeah,
Some deep shit.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
she was getting fucking.
so she got slandered by this guy who was her friend until this point.
God damn.
And
after
then-
her service too.
Yeah.
Damn. That's
So then
fucked up.
she lost her work visa and 6 months of gigs.
Was she stuck in America then?
No, she went back to France. She was
Cool.
able because she was a French citizen.
But why
Yeah,
did
'cause
it
she-
affect her gigs in France and
They were her gigs in America, so she had
Oh,
6
okay.
more months of a tour planned.
that they can't?
That they
I
just canceled
see.
all of them because they took her work visa away.
This might be a reason why we're not familiar with her name.
Probably, yeah.
Because
Well, and
that
also,
time there could have been fucking very poignant
yeah.
in American culture, but because of American culture,
Yeah.
she was removed. You know, yeah.
Yeah,
It's,
definitely.
fuck.
So-
History.
The next piece kind of leads me to believe she might have been semi a communist sympathizer because she ended up playing for Fidel Castro's 7th anniversary celebration, which broke attendance records.
I mean, the thing is that America was all against fucking anything communist or red during that time because it opposed anything that they. I mean, I'm not trying to go off on a huge tangent here, but like it opposed everything that American capitalism stood for. So,
Yeah.
Castro
so
was.
there, and yeah, but the thing is that during that time in the world history, communism was seen as a viable, you know, governmental system.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the USSR was doing well for like, you know, I mean,
A while.
people suffered, but yeah, it was doing well for a while. I mean, Cuba and Fidel
I was about to
Castro.
bring up
I mean,
Castro, yeah.
and Cuba was doing well as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and Cuba is still doing, you know, pretty damn good under, you know, a socialist, communist, you know,
Socialist
governmental.
democratic state. Is that
Yeah,
what
yeah,
that is?
something like
It's-
that. Yeah.
Something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
But no, as I said, not trying to go off it.
Sure.
Yeah. But then that's what I'm saying is like, you know.
I don't
It is-
necessarily
it
see it
is-
as a bad thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's like fucking. So the reason why probably a lot of Americans don't know her name is due to that. You know.
Slander.
Yeah. Completely erase anything that has to do with communism or socialism out of the. You know.
Based on fact or fucking.
American, you know, minds.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Go off topic, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah,
No.
way off topic, sorry.
But so later on in life, like after she divorced her 4th husband, the Joe Bouillon guy, she ended up facing like some pretty severe, like she was, her house was foreclosed on. She was facing bankruptcy and all sorts of stuff. But she was friends with, there was an actor and a princess that both like offered her aid, and like one of them gave her an apartment, and like they just like basically set her up.
A princess.
It was a princess of Morocco through marriage, not birth.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Princess.
Power.
Yeah.
That sounds so extravagant.
Yeah.
Princess of Morocco. It's giving me
I know, right?
Pretty much.
But like, you know, like 11, 12 kids is like a lot of money. So,
Yeah,
you know, like it
yeah.
makes sense.
No, definitely.
Yeah, you're gonna need a big
It's
house for
needed.
that. Yeah.
But so like she was considering like stopping doing entertainment and stuff just because of all of this happening, and she just wanted to like take care of her kids and make sure everything was good. But her family was like, no, like they're super supportive and wanted her to keep going. So in 1973, she did another performance at Carnegie Hall, and she got a standing ovation.
Carnegie Hall.
That's
Hell
a pretty
yeah.
big deal.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's if anything, my understanding is that it's any big performer's dream. So.
Yeah. So
So
we haven't even gotten into any of her civil rights activism yet.
Oh, wow.
we touched on it.
We touched on
We
it.
touched on it.
So she was a very active supporter of the civil rights movement in America. And in the 1950s, after being denied reservations at 36 hotels due to discrimination,
Shit.
she wrote several U.S. articles about segregation.
Okay. So she wrote these articles. Were they actually
They were
printed
yes.
for major
They
newspapers or news sources, or were these things that were put out in like, um, local zine magazine kind of? Okay, it
I
was
would
more of
say
like
more
a.
local, yeah.
Okay,
And
okay,
like through friends and things like that, you know.
but obviously the word got out that this was
Mhm.
an issue, that there were these.
Yeah. So
Racist motherfuckers.
yes. So then she ended up traveling across the South and giving inspiring speeches about the equality of races in France. And she gave one at I can't remember the exact name of the university right now. I didn't write it down, but she ended up giving a speech at like a traditionally all black college in Tennessee.
What year was this?
Early 1950s. She's like traveling around the South as a black woman, just giving speeches about racial discrimination and how much better it is in France.
I'm not sorry to sound ignorant now, but there were actually like black universities, like colleges. Okay,
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
because it was totally segregated though. Like
Oh,
it's
that's why that was
it
okay.
that's why it was
Okay,
all black, you
okay, I
know.
got you. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
That,
it was probably like a much lower quality of education than like a white college at the time and stuff, you know what I mean? So like it probably wasn't a great college, but they did have it, which is just like pretty awesome that they had it in general. Keys. Um, so then her insistence on only playing non-segregated shows at this time, because she was like touring as well as an entertainer, not just doing the speeches and stuff to colleges, but she would only play non-segregated shows. Like if it was segregated, she would just leave. She wouldn't play it at
hell yeah.
all.
Oh,
And
Yeah,
yeah,
this
I mean,
touches
that
back
takes
to
some,
her.
that
yeah,
takes some courage in the South in America in the
fuck
1950s.
Hey,
yeah.
dude.
Yeah, that's,
Seriously.
But
yeah.
so this actually led to the full integration of races at live entertainment shows in Las Vegas.
Oh, wow.
I'm sure Las Vegas fucking profited off of that.
Fuck
Fucking,
Oh, for
yes.
sure.
Las Vegas knows how to make money.
Yeah, Las Vegas is all about money. And hey, if there's
Fucking-
anything
if
that's
there's
keeping them from
entertainment.
making money, they're going to get rid of it.
Yeah, seriously. Fucking, shit. Okay, so fucking
So then after all this is happening, after she like did her thing in Vegas and everything, so she actually got contacted by some KKK members. They were like calling her and sending her letters and stuff, like trying to threaten her and say all this shit, and because she's working for civil rights. And her response to that was basically, "Fuck off! I'm not afraid of you bitches. Leave me alone." Not direct quote, obviously.
Oh, okay, all right.
That is my words.
So much of me was hoping
Yeah, for real.
it was a direct quote.
That would
but-
straight up be the best direct quote we've ever had on this show.
Let's say it happened, even though it didn't.
let's
Maybe it did. Sorry.
So all of this actually made her extremely controversial, obviously, and it led to a lot of black people shunning her because they feared her outspokenness and they like feared retribution for being like a fan or like showing their support directly for her.
You're under threat of violence at the time, for sure. Yeah.
But she just said fuck it and kept going. And in 1963, she spoke at the March on Washington alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and she was the only official female speaker at the march.
Wow.
Fucking amazing.
That's really awesome.
So I have a quote from her speech here. I have walked into the palaces of kings and queens, and into the houses of presidents, and much more. But I could not walk into a hotel in America or get a cup of coffee, and that made me mad. And when I get mad, I open my big mouth. And then look out, because when Josephine opens her mouth, they hear it all over the world.
Fuck yeah.
Hell yeah. I thought that was so, like
Yep.
just the confidence in
Yeah,
herself
it's
too,
so-
like
yeah.
Right.
so cool.
I mean, she has a great point. Is that like she is welcomed everywhere else in the world,
Yeah.
and massive, even fucking in Italy, fascist Italy,
Yeah.
into high ranking fucking political gatherings,
Like
and
government
shit.
officials.
And
Right.
democratic U.S., she's not welcome because she's colored. You know, that is
Yeah.
that is completely fucked.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that hits you.
Yeah, it's rough. So after the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King, his widow actually asked Josephine if she would take over and be the head of the civil rights movement, and she ended up she took many days, like maybe a couple weeks, to make a decision, and ultimately she said no because her children were too young to lose their mother. So she made a decision for her family, and also she wasn't an American citizen, so like I think a lot of that played into it, as well as like, well, I'm French, like people aren't going to take me as seriously as an American citizen, and like also a woman, so she didn't have as much backing in America, nearly as much as like a man, even a black man, so I think she took a lot of that into consideration and just kind of was like, I'm not the person to do this.
I mean, I feel like a lot of people, you know, in the reactionary way that they would do it, would look at her and say that this is not her fight because she's French.
Yeah. And so I think that was like part of it too, was just like people aren't going to take me as seriously because I don't have American citizenship. Like I don't technically belong in this country even though I was born here. Yeah.
It still makes you feel like, though, this is a person that we should know.
Absolutely.
We should know this. This is the type of people that's removed from our history, and that goes back to the time when she's around. It's still systematic, like, fucking control of our education. It's not.
But this is
It's
exactly why we
fucking.
do this podcast. For these women especially. I don't know. I think her whole career was just amazing, from her entertaining to her civil rights to being a spy with fucking invisible ink. Like, so
A
cool.
fucking spy. A
Fucking
fucking spy.
like a legit ass spy, and like a good one.
Like, James Bond isn't real, and she did what he is known to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And she did it. She actually fucking did it. James Bond is a fucking fictional dude.
As a black woman
and
in
this
the
black
40s.
Woman, actual during the fucking during
Amazing.
conflict.
Amazing.
Fuck yeah. Where work like that was penalty of death as a war crime, and
that was kind of her civil rights career. She kind of like went back to France after that and started doing other stuff. But so total, she had 4 marriages to men, but she was a bisexual and she had several relationships with women, including the blues singer Clara Smith. So she had, like I said, 12 children, and she adopted all of them during her civil rights work. So she started like early 50s and began adopting them then. So she was like 43, 44-ish when she started adopting children. So she called her family of adopted children her Rainbow Tribe. And she
fucking hippies. Sorry.
Well, it's because they were of all different races. She had like a Japanese son. There was like literally from everywhere. There was like American,
excellent.
French. She really wanted a Jewish baby, but ended up getting a French baby instead.
Adopt babies.
Yeah. But so she kind of like used her children in a way, and it was like a really good way. But they said like there was like a quote from one of her kids. I'm paraphrasing. That was like, she was our mother, she was good, but everyone's imperfect, and she had imperfections. So, like, she took good care of them, she did great things, but, like, they could have had more of a legitimate childhood, Because,
I mean, a person that has that much going on in their life,
I was about to say,
all of their life, I mean,
living under a house of
no matter how much they want to be a mother or anything like that, that definitely adds a different aspect, to where they had their focuses in other areas, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but someone is usually hurt when someone is completely
Well,
focused in other areas.
touching on that, I mean, like growing up under a house of like, fame and like, all this like constant attention, what you're doing and stuff, like I'm sure it took away time with relation with the children kind of thing. Yeah. That's not too surprising.
Well, so even beyond that, though, she kind of was using her children as a metaphor for how the world could and should be, whereas like humans of multiple races and religions and ethnicities could live peacefully as brothers and sisters. But she kind of took it a little far, and when they had the giant chateau before she divorced, she would have them like she would charge people admission, and they would like come like basically just like like it was like a zoo kind of like people would come and like pay to watch her children play together to see like look this little Asian boy and black girl and white boy are all playing together, isn't that great, like we could do that too.
It's like the Simpsons episode where Apu has the quintuplets.
Yes.
And they set them up and give them like stage names, and they're like, oh, okay. That's pretty fucky. I'm not.
I was
They lost some
yeah.
points.
Lost some points.
Lost some points.
Using children as like a fucking societal experiment is. That's MK Ultra shit.
She also
It worked for the government.
But yeah, she also would have them like perform for people like as like a little dance troupe or whatever, like dance and sing. Yeah. And so like that's kind of weird to me. Like I wouldn't want to be made to perform by my mom, but
yeah, fuck that.
yeah. And then like that's all like weird, but it's kind of like the weird shit you'd expect from this kind of eccentric lady. Whereas she would like kind of force different religions on all the kids. So she like raised a Catholic kid and a Jewish kid and a Muslim kid and stuff, but they weren't originally from those backgrounds. Like if they were raised in their home place, that's not what they would have grown up with, you know what I mean? So she kind of like, and how the fuck do you keep that straight? Like, okay, this kid's got to pray 3 times a day, so I got to make sure that five times a day?
That's
3.
a social experiment.
It is. It's fucking weird. But
okay,
like I said, like they were well cared for, and none of them, like, as far as I know, like none of them outright just hate her or think she was a terrible person. Like they all just thought, and like she's older at this point too. Like she's in her like 50s.
It's not like
But at the same time, it's like trying to. I mean, when it comes to just society in general, trying to push things on people that they don't want just because.
That's a different type of neglect.
It's not right by any means.
I mean, not that she was neglectful, but that is a form of neglect.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, isn't it? I mean, that's like
I don't know if it's neglect, but I would
like,
say like a form of abuse. Kind of like, I don't know. It's definitely like unconsensual stuff.
Neglect
it's one thing to be trying to get someone
We're getting into political, social debates.
By the law, they're 2 different things.
I mean,
fuck those guys.
I mean, I don't want to get too far off topic here, but like, I mean, it's one thing to do it when like you believe in said religion and you want your child to believe it. I mean, that's not right.
Like you have your whole family do the same thing.
But to have like several children and try to teach them all different things because you want to see how it affects the way they interact with people.
I don't like that. That's
laboratory weird. That's evil. That's Dr. Evil shit.
It's super weird. Definitely super weird.
Social
But
that's villain shit.
Well, but then you gotta think like so she actually ended up changing her religion late in life. So I feel like her kids kind of had that to look at too, and we're like, oh, you can just change religions? Well, I'm gonna do that, And then like also the fact that there was 12 of them, I feel like they kind of were able to like maybe they like practiced in front of her, but I bet they all talked about it and like chose their own bits, you know,
That's
like
true.
because
They
they
helped
were
each other
exposed to
develop.
like every type of religion, you
That's
know, so
very
like
true.
I bet they have like honestly one of the most well-rounded views on religion like that you could find in people.
Yeah,
One thing
I
you
can see
wonder
that.
is around the age they wore, because like I feel like a closer age amongst them would create kind of like a unit, like kind of like a little society. But no, but like Nono was saying, like they'd be able to discuss like, you know, I learned this. This is my understanding of, you know, um, religion, basically, theologies, deities, and you know, this is what I practice because mom says so.
Yeah.
But like you touched on, I'm sure if they were closer in age, that the debate, or maybe not even a debate, but a discussion of like
Well, and
what sense they could make of it. You
yeah.
know?
Right.
Well, and then
Yeah.
you
Um,
got to think like the older, like rebellious ones were probably like teaching the younger ones about their religion and being like, you know, you don't have to follow this forever. And like people change religions. And you know what I mean?
and the
Like
fact she
Yeah.
herself,
she did later on.
um,
I
do we
mean,
know what she originally was
I don't
practicing
know
in
what she
religion?
originally
Okay.
was, but she became a Baptist, which is super
Oh,
weird.
damn it.
Super weird.
No.
Yeah.
I
I didn't want to include that.
I was hoping for agnostic.
I know, right? So in total, she ended up adopting 2 daughters and 10 sons.
Boys,
Hmm.
for I feel like she did so much for like minority groups. The fact that like men were someone that she,
I don't know.
mm,
I really don't know what that is there. Maybe she
maybe
was
they were
trying to
cute.
raise like a new.
That boy's
But
cute.
I
I'll
mean,
tell you,
I
well,
mean,
it's not really like
what's the
getting a
best way
puppy at the
to combat
pound.
misogyny than by raising men in a anti-misogynistic way?
Well
That's
put,
exactly what I
man.
was gonna
Well
say.
put.
Yeah.
Hell
Well, you
yeah.
put it better, but yeah.
No, that's good fucking point.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Um.
Hell yeah.
So on April 8th of 1975, Josephine did a show in Paris called Josephine Bobino, 1975. That's part of the title. Sorry, I'm not repeating myself. But it was a review celebrating her 50 years in French show business. And there was so much demand for the show opening night that they actually had to add a bunch of fold-out chairs to the theater,
That's
which is
dope.
like already
Oh,
a big
wow.
theater. And so opening night was attended by Sophia Loren, Mick Jagger, Diana Ross, and Liza Minnelli, which is like fucking
God
crazy.
damn. And at the time, those were the like some of the
In the
like ultimate
70s, yeah.
superstars. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
So 4 days after the show, she was found lying unresponsive in her bed, surrounded by articles of glowing reviews for the show. And she had had a brain hemorrhage. So she actually ended up dying in the hospital on April 12th, 1975, at 68 years old.
Okay, I need to backtrack a little bit.
Go for it.
Okay, so you said she was found in her apartment or home, surrounded by these reviews. This is when she had her aneurysm. Or was it
Brain hemorrhage.
hemorrhage? Okay. She didn't die there. She was in the hospital for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The whole being found thing, I'm not gonna lie, sounds getting all conspiracy theory. It sounds staged.
Yeah, it
Be-
sounds sus as hell, dude.
I'm thinking
Yeah.
one of her children probably walked in and was like, "Mom, wake up! It's time for breakfast," and then she didn't move. You know what I mean?
But
But
surrounded
the
by
her
like
tabloids of
yeah,
her
well,
previous last work.
Well, to me, it seems like she just like went to bed reading them so she could like cheer, like be like, "Oh man, people still love me. This is so cool. I've been out of showbiz for," you know what I mean? Like
Okay.
she'd been kind of cooling down at that point, and I feel like
Okay.
it was just kind of an ego boost thing for herself.
Okay.
And so
Maybe
she was just like
knew,
fell asleep reading them.
maybe knowing that like she was about getting to that time and she was just reliving glory days kind of thing maybe.
Yeah, well,
maybe
they were
not
all
glory days,
about this
recent,
particular.
that recent show that
Yeah.
yeah, reflecting on the past.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Or maybe she had hit the peak and point of her career that she was that had drove her to do all these things. She had done all these great things. Maybe this particular show she saw as the highlight of her, her fucking uh, holy grail, I guess, if you
Yeah.
will,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
reaching her fucking peak, and she recognized that she was kind of, her time had done, and she was ready
Yeah.
to move, so she, like Nona said, was like, this is it. But then again, I'm not gonna lie, a major part of me is like, who done it?
Oh, I feel it. Yeah, I mean, especially in this day and age, it's hard
Oh,
to
man.
not think that way.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I mean, you got to think about it too. She's led a really rough life. She's done like a ton of traveling. She lived on the streets as a child. She
Right.
was born 6 weeks
Sleeping in the
premature.
cardboard boxes.
Yeah, like
and,
scavenging
yep,
food. She
exactly.
spent her whole childhood malnourished.
Before she
and
was even adolescent age.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So like that fucks you up
Lived
forever.
hard and fast.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
yeah, she was like an entertainer. So I don't know. I don't think there was foul play. There was never any like conspiracy theories that I found about it. So.
Well, I'm starting one right now.
All right.
Anyways.
So she is the only American-born woman to receive full French military honors at her funeral.
Wow,
Mhm.
Hell yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah. So she ended up being buried at Monaco's. Okay, I'm just gonna say Cemetery of Monaco because forever she is considered the very first black female international superstar.
Rightfully so.
Abs-
Sounds like,
yeah.
most definitely.
She was the first African American female in a major motion picture. Like,
Yeah,
she
definitely.
absolutely earned that.
Oh, yeah.
Hell yeah. Wow, what a fucking life, though.
What
Yeah.
a serious
Sure.
like you'd think she lived to 103.
I can't
Right.
believe there's not some sort of action film based on her spy
There
work
should
and
be.
Right,
shit.
yeah.
You know, like
That'd be a
that would
great
that would
movie.
bring-
Or even just like
I feel like that makes
drama
Hollywood.
film, based on her life.
Yeah,
I mean,
even a drama.
I mean,
yeah, a
I
drama.
mean,
even.
her spy action
Yeah.
and all that was a pretty small part of, surprisingly a small part of her entire career.
I mean, it was
Right.
only
In
like
the
7-8
political-
years.
That's a good point because she had
Right.
done so much. Nothing really outmasks or outweighs the other remarkable things she does, whether it's her
Yeah.
performances or spy work or fucking even her work with civil rights.
Yeah.
None shy to the other. It was very like fluid. Like she always had a project.
Yeah. She
Right.
always had a
Yeah.
million things
And she
going
was
on.
driven
Definitely.
to like obviously accomplish, these fucking
I mean, her spy
Goals.
work and her civil rights
work.
was great, but still, like the whole thing with the religion and her kids.
Super
it
weird.
leaves
Still
a bad
super
taste in
weird.
my mouth, you
But-
know? It's like-
In Dungeons and Dragons, she's like a level 20 bard. Yeah.
Well, and you gotta think though too that like living on the streets as a kid has gotta be like, because you can't ever really just like sit and rest. Like you have to be finding food, you have to be finding shelter, you have to be getting water, you have to be like cleaning yourself, you have to be working because she worked when she lived on the
Right.
streets. So it's like she never had a moment's rest unless she was sleeping. So that's been her life since she was 8 years old.
Just
So you
this
have to think
driven-
like, how is she gonna just sit and chill later in life? Like that's probably not ingrained in her whatsoever. Like she probably doesn't
Right.
have the ability to just like sit and relax.
No, she needs fucking an end goal, a project, something.
Constant
yeah.
motion.
It's the quest for the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just an endeavor.
Just she was so cool.
That's pretty.
I was really
admirable.
glad
Admirable.
we did this
Damn.
one.
yeah, definitely.
All right.
Never knew about her.
Definitely
So-
not. But
Which-
that's something that should be in our textbooks.
Yeah,
It
well,
should.
for sure.
And I
And if
honestly
it's not in ours, I feel like it would be something that's in like French textbooks.
Yeah.
You know, like, I
would
bet,
not
like,
be,
in
I would
our-
not be surprised if it is.
Well,
Yeah.
I honestly just can't even believe that, because I get like her whole life not being in textbooks and stuff, but like the fact that she spoke at the march, the
Yeah,
March
exactly.
on
That's
Washington,
a
like
big
that's not
fucking-
even
that's a-
mentioned.
that's a big
That's
fucking
fucking
thing.
crazy
Yeah.
to
I
me.
mean, the Million Man March was like half a page in my textbook, but
We studied it for like the whole month of February.
yeah, I was.
But yeah,
Yeah.
you went to college or school in the mountains.
Yeah, I went to school in the middle of nowhere, so it was like,
Slightly
Yeah,
different.
they pride themselves in their ignorance.
Well, yeah. So thank you, Sam and Will, for joining me today.
Thank you, no.
And
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
thanks everyone for listening. We'll have you back next time.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you liked that episode, give us a follow on social media. We are at Tenacious Bees Podcast. We share lots of silly historical things and just fun photos of ourselves and lots of dog pics. So you can listen on Podbean, YouTube, and Spotify, and our Patreon has some sweet perks. We have extras about all the women that we do, and we do really fun recipe cards that you can print off that are either a dish from the era of the woman or a fun cocktail. Because what brings people, especially women, together more than food and drinks? We hope you come back next time for another episode.